so much fun because I had never made pasta before. I wasn't coming as the expert to show everyone and sort of show off how great of a cook I was. We were doing something together, exploring something together, learning something together, making mistakes, dropping stuff all over the floor. There was even one moment where somebody dropped a big hunk of Parmesan cheese in this massive pot of boiling water. I don't even know how he managed to do this. I wasn't looking, but all of a sudden I was being splashed by boiling water, and I didn't know where it was coming from. And my friend is on the floor, silent, but he's on the floor, and he's kind of shaking, and I thought something was terribly wrong. He was injured. He was laughing and pointing. And all he could say was, "Man down! Man down!" I didn't know what he was pointing at. I didn't know that he had somehow flung. What he was doing was shaving this Parmesan, and it was such a big hunk that it flew out of his hand into the pot of boiling water. But that made it, and there was a story that I remember now more than 10 years later, how great of a time that we had. And that taught me a lot about the kind of, not just the kind of cook that I wanted to be, but what hospitality meant. What does it mean to make someone comfortable, to open up and to share their lives with you, to share a piece of themselves? How to create an environment like that. It wasn't through a fancy tablecloth, through a gorgeous centerpiece, through crystal and china. That didn't matter at all. It was more about the environment and the act of sharing something that we all created together. So from then on, I was always thinking about dinner party menus that would have people involved in some way. So I would do things like a burrito bar. So I would have, different types of meat and veggies and toppings and lay it all out, and then people could come and make their own and sort of go through this little assembly. I did the same thing with baked potatoes. I had these huge baked potatoes. I threw 15 of them in the oven, and everybody just came and made their own and had a great time. If I ever did anything where I made it all, it was something really simple, like a big batch of spaghetti and French bread and salad. So I had to rethink what my goal was. If my goal was to be a fancy chef in a fancy restaurant, or if it was to go beyond food to something else. And I decided then that it was the something else that I was really after. So the other thing that this helped me think about, so I didn't say at the beginning, but I'm Mennonite. Has anybody ever heard of Mennonites? A couple people have heard of Mennonites. So when I first heard of Mennonites, I, in my brain, filed through Hittite, Jebusite, Amorite, Mennonite. I don't know what a Mennonite is. A lot of people, when they think Mennonite, they think Amish. But there's a whole host of Mennonite faith. Mennonites come from the historic Peace Church. So they're sort of related to some Baptists, the Radical Reformation era. But Mennonites are a wide spectrum. So there's some really, really conservative Mennonites that look Amish, where women wear long skirts and head coverings. I obviously am not of that particular end of the spectrum. And then you have Mennonites who are tree hugging, laying down in front of tanks, protesting in war zones, and things like that. Those are more Mennonites than I'm. So Mennonites also take food really, really seriously. Food is really important. But it's the down-home kind of food. It's food that really is, when you think about soul food, it's that thing that brings back memories of your childhood and where you grew up and what is really deep and meaningful for you. So for me, it's a dinner party that is one of the most meaningful things. And I realized that for me, a dinner party was really what communion is all about. So communion, or the Lord's Supper, or Eucharist, or Mass. Any other words that you know for what I'm talking about here? Are those all of them? So when you go to church and there's some version of bread and some version of wine or grape juice, some churches have communion or Eucharist or the Lord's Supper every Sunday. and some churches have it once a month or even less frequently. So there are three views about what is actually happening when you take communion. One is that, and this would be on the end of the Catholic Church, one is that this bread and juice literally transforms into the body and blood of Jesus. It's called transubstantiation. One remove from that is what's called consubstantiation, that it sort of transforms, but it still stays physically the bread and wine, but there's some aspect that's mysterious that Jesus joins with that bread and juice. So Methodists are consubstantiation. And then there's my end of the spectrum where communion is a symbol. So when we take communion, we think of it as this is a symbolic act that I am always proclaiming the Lord's death until he comes again. And so what that means for me is that we together say we are the body of Jesus, and that is what we do when we get together. So for me, thinking about communion has been thinking about a dinner party. And dinner party is us getting together, reaffirming one another, encouraging one another, really sharing what's going on in our lives,